The morning sun shone bright over the city as Jasmine Williams woke up early on Saturday. She was excited because today was a special day. She had been working at the local grocery store all summer, and now she had saved enough money to open her first bank account. Her grandmother had promised to take her to First National Bank to help her with everything. Jasmine was 16 years old and felt proud of herself. She had worked hard, showing up to her job every day on time. She helped customers, stocked shelves, and even worked at the cash register. Every 2 weeks, she got her paycheck and put most of it in a safe place at home. Now she had $300, and her grandmother said it was time to put that money in a bank where it would be safe and could grow. Her grandmother, Mrs. Williams, was a strong woman who had raised Jasmine since she was little. She believed in teaching Jasmine important life lessons. Opening a bank account was one of those lessons. Mrs. Williams had told her granddaughter many times that learning to save money was one of the most important things a young person could do. They got ready and left the house around 10 in the morning. The bank was only 15 minutes away by bus. Jasmine carried her money in an envelope inside her purse. She held it tight, making sure nothing would happen to it. Mrs. Williams smiled at her granddaughter, seeing how responsible she had become. When they arrived at First National Bank, Jasmine felt a little nervous. The building looked big and important with its tall glass windows and clean white walls. She had never been inside a bank before for her own business. Mrs. Williams held the door open for her and they walked in together. Inside, the bank was cool and quiet. There were about 6 or 7 other customers waiting in line or sitting in chairs. The floor was shiny and clean. Behind the counter, 3 bank employees worked at their stations. Security cameras hung from the ceiling in different corners. Everything looked very official and professional. Jasmine and her grandmother joined the line. There were 2 people ahead of them. Jasmine looked around, taking in everything. She saw posters on the walls about loans and savings accounts. One poster showed a young couple buying their first house. Another showed someone saving for college. Jasmine thought about her own future and what she wanted to do after high school. Mrs. Williams noticed her granddaughter looking around and squeezed her hand gently. "You doing okay, baby?" she asked in a soft voice. Jasmine nodded and smiled. "Yes, Grandma. I'm just a little nervous." "Nothing to be nervous about," Mrs. Williams said. "You worked hard for this money. You deserve to feel proud." The line moved slowly but steadily. After about 10 minutes, it was their turn. A bank employee at the second window waved them over. His name tag said David Chen. He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s with short black hair and glasses. He wore a white shirt and blue tie, the same uniform all the other employees wore. "Good morning," David said with a smile. "How can I help you today?" Mrs. Williams spoke first. "Good morning. My granddaughter here wants to open a savings account. This is her first one." David nodded and looked at Jasmine. "That's great. Congratulations on taking this step. We'll get you all set up." He pulled out some papers from a drawer and placed them on the counter. "Can I see your ID, please?" Jasmine reached into her purse and pulled out her school ID card. David looked at it and then at her. "Do you have a state ID or any other form of identification?" Jasmine shook her head. "No, sir. Just this one." David thought for a moment. "Okay, that should work since your grandmother is here with you. Ma'am, I'll need to see your ID as well." Mrs. Williams pulled out her driver's license and handed it to him. David took both IDs and began typing information into his computer. The keyboard clicked softly as he worked. Jasmine watched him carefully, trying to understand what he was doing. "So, Jasmine," David said while typing, "what grade are you in?" "I'll be a junior this year," Jasmine answered. "School starts in 2 weeks, that's nice. And you've been working this summer?" "Yes, sir. At Parker's grocery store on 5th Street. David continued typing. "Good for you. Not many young people want to work these days." He printed out several forms and placed them in front of Jasmine. "I need you to fill out these forms. Just your basic information like name, address, phone number, and your social security number if you have one." Mrs. Williams helped Jasmine with the forms. They carefully filled in each blank space with neat handwriting. When they finished, David took the forms and reviewed them. He asked a few more questions about Jasmine's employment and how much money she wanted to deposit. "I have $300, Jasmine said proudly, pulling out her envelope. David took the envelope and counted the money carefully. Jasmine had 10 20s, 5 10s, and 10 5s, all neatly organized. David counted it twice to make sure, then entered the amount into his computer. All right, Miss Williams, you're opening a basic savings account with an initial deposit of $300. There's no monthly fee as long as you keep at least $50 in the account. You'll get a debit card in the mail within 7 to 10 business days. He continued explaining the details of the account, while another employee walked up behind him. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Jasmine felt good about her decision. She imagined herself saving even more money and maybe one day having enough to buy a car or help pay for college. Mrs. Williams sat next to her granddaughter, proud and happy. The bank continued its normal business around them. Other customers came and went. Phones rang softly in the background. Everything felt routine and ordinary. Nobody knew that in just a few moments, this ordinary day would turn into something that would change everything for Jasmine, her family, and even the bank itself. David continued working on Jasmine's account, clicking through different screens on his computer. A colleague named Steve walked over to his station, carrying a stack of papers. Steve was another bank employee who worked at the window next to David's. The two men were friendly with each other and often chatted during slow moments. Steve leaned against the counter near David's computer, waiting for something to print from the machine behind them. He glanced at the paperwork in front of David and saw Jasmine's employment information listed as Parker's grocery store. David looked up at Steve and then back at the form. He had a small smirk on his face. Without thinking about who might hear him, David spoke to Steve in a voice that was meant to be quiet, but was actually loud enough for others to hear. "Of course she works at a grocery store," David said with a slight laugh. "Probably taking home free chicken every night, right?" He chuckled at his own words. The comment hung in the air like a dark cloud. Steve's eyes went wide and he quickly looked away, uncomfortable with what David had just said. He grabbed his papers from the printer and walked away without responding. Jasmine's smile disappeared from her face. She had heard exactly what David said. Her heart started beating fast and her stomach felt sick. She looked at her grandmother, hoping maybe she had heard wrong. But the expression on Mrs. Williams's face told her that she had not imagined it. Mrs. Williams's entire body went stiff. Her jaw tightened and her eyes narrowed. She had heard every single word clearly. For a moment she could not believe what had just happened. This man, this bank employee, had just made a racist joke about her granddaughter right in front of them. The comment David made was based on a harmful stereotype about black people and fried chicken. It was meant to be funny to him, but it was cruel and racist. It reduced Jasmine to nothing more than a stereotype, ignoring all her hard work and treating her like she was less than human. Mrs. Williams took a deep breath, trying to control her anger. She wanted to handle this properly, not lose her temper, but she also was not going to let this slide. She leaned forward and spoke in a clear, firm voice. "Excuse me," Mrs. Williams said. "What did you just say?" David looked up from his computer and his face showed that he knew he had made a mistake. His cheeks turned a little red and he tried to smile, but it looked forced and nervous. "I'm sorry," David said, pretending he did not understand the question. "You heard me," Mrs. Williams said, her voice getting stronger. "I want you to repeat what you just said about my granddaughter." Other customers in the bank started to notice that something was wrong. A woman waiting in line turned to look at them. An older man sitting in a chair nearby stopped reading his newspaper. The bank suddenly felt quieter as people became aware of the tension. David shifted in his seat uncomfortably. He let out a small, nervous laugh. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't say anything inappropriate." "You made a joke about her working at a grocery store," Mrs. Williams said. "You said something about taking home chicken. We both heard you clearly." Jasmine felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She was embarrassed and hurt. She had been so excited about opening her bank account, about being responsible and grown up. Now this man had made her feel small and ashamed. She wanted to leave, but her grandmother's hand on her shoulder kept her there. David tried to laugh it off again. "Ma'am, I think you misheard me. I was just making conversation with my colleague. It was just a joke. Nothing serious. A joke?" Mrs. Williams's voice rose slightly. "You think making racist comments about a 16-year-old girl is funny?" The word racist made several people in the bank turn their full attention to what was happening. The woman in line gasped softly. The security guard near the door looked over with concern. Another bank employee at a different window stopped what she was doing and watched. David's face turned redder. He looked around nervously, realizing that people were watching and listening. "Ma'am, please. I really think you misunderstood. I would never say something racist. Let's just calm down and finish opening this account." "Do not tell me to calm down," Mrs. Williams said firmly. "You made a racist comment about my granddaughter, and now you're trying to act like it didn't happen. I want to speak to your manager right now." David's nervous smile disappeared completely. He knew he was in trouble. "That's really not necessary. I apologize if you were offended, but it was just a misunderstanding. Let me get someone else to help you finish the paperwork if that would make you more comfortable." "I want your manager," Mrs. Williams repeated. Now, Jasmine wiped a tear from her cheek. She felt humiliated. Everyone in the bank was looking at them now. She wished the floor would open up and swallow her. This was supposed to be a happy day, a proud moment in her life. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare. David stood up from his chair. "Okay, I'll get the manager. But I want to be clear that this is all a big misunderstanding." He walked away from his station, heading toward the back offices. While they waited, the woman who had been standing in line walked over to Mrs. Williams. She was a white woman in her 40s with kind eyes. "Excuse me," the woman said quietly. "I just want you to know that I heard what he said too. It was completely inappropriate. If you need a witness, I'm happy to speak up." Mrs. Williams nodded, grateful. "Thank you. That means a lot." The woman went back to her place in line, but she kept watching, ready to support them if needed. Jasmine looked at her grandmother. "Maybe we should just leave, Grandma," she whispered. "Absolutely not," Mrs. Williams said. "We are not leaving. What he said was wrong and he needs to be held accountable. You did nothing wrong, baby. You worked hard for your money, and you deserve respect." After a few long minutes, David returned with a woman wearing a dark blue suit. Her name tag identified her as Patricia Hernandez, branch manager. She looked professional and serious as she approached them. "Good morning," Patricia said. "I'm Patricia Hernandez, the branch manager. I understand there's been some kind of issue. Can you tell me what happened?" Mrs. Williams straightened her back and looked Patricia directly in the eyes. She was ready to make sure her granddaughter's dignity was defended. This was far from over. Mrs. Williams looked at Patricia Hernandez, the branch manager, with steady eyes. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, wanting to explain everything clearly and calmly, even though she was angry inside. "My granddaughter came here today to open her first savings account," Mrs. Williams began. "She's 16 years old and has been working hard all summer at Parker's grocery store. She saved $300, and she was proud and excited to start being responsible with her money." Patricia listened carefully, her face showing concern. She held a small notepad in her hand, ready to take notes. "Your employee, David Chen, was helping us with the paperwork," Mrs. Williams continued. "Everything was going fine until he made a racist joke about my granddaughter. He looked at her employment information, then turned to another employee and said, 'Of course she works at a grocery store, probably taking home free chicken every night.' He said it right in front of us." Patricia's expression changed. Her eyebrows drew together, and she looked genuinely troubled by what she was hearing. She glanced at David, who was standing a few feet away with his arms crossed, looking at the floor. "Is this true?" Patricia asked David. David quickly shook his head. "No, that's not what happened at all. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just making casual conversation with Steve. I didn't say anything like that. They must have misheard me." Mrs. Williams felt her anger rising again. "We did not mishear anything. Both my granddaughter and I heard you clearly. You made a racist stereotype about black people and fried chicken. Don't stand there and lie about it." The woman who had been waiting in line earlier stepped forward. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was firm. "Excuse me, but I heard it too. I was standing right there in line. He definitely said what this lady is describing. I heard the whole thing." Patricia turned to look at the woman, surprised to have another witness. "And you are?" "My name is Karen Mitchell. I'm a customer here. I've had my account at this bank for 5 years. I was waiting in line and I heard exactly what he said. It was inappropriate and racist." David's face went pale. He had not expected anyone else to speak up. "That's not... I mean, maybe you heard something out of context." "There is no context that makes what you said okay," Mrs. Williams interrupted. "You made a racist comment about a child. My granddaughter is sitting right here and she heard everything. Look at her." Everyone turned to look at Jasmine. She had tears running down her cheeks. Her head was down and she looked like she wanted to disappear. She felt so embarrassed and hurt. This was supposed to be a good day. And now all these people were looking at her, talking about her, arguing because of her. Patricia saw Jasmine's tears and seemed to understand how serious this situation was. "I am very sorry about this," she said softly to Jasmine and Mrs. Williams. "This is not how we treat our customers. Can we please step into my office so we can discuss this privately?" Mrs. Williams shook her head. "No, this happened out here in public in front of other customers. Your employee thought it was okay to humiliate my granddaughter in public. Why should we go hide in your office?" "I understand your feelings," Patricia said carefully. "But I think we can handle this better in a private setting, where we can really talk about what happened and what we can do to make this right." Another customer, an elderly black man who had been sitting in the waiting area, stood up and walked over. "I've been banking here for 20 years, he said in a deep voice. "And I'm disgusted by what I just witnessed. This young lady came in here to do something positive, and your employee treated her like she was nothing. That's shameful." More people in the bank were now paying attention. Some were nodding in agreement. A younger couple near the ATM machines whispered to each other, looking angry. The security guard shifted uncomfortably by the door, unsure of what to do. David tried again to defend himself. "Look, if I said something that was taken the wrong way, I apologize. But I really don't think this needs to be such a big deal. Can we all just move on?" "Move on?" Mrs. Williams's voice grew louder. "You want us to just forget that you made a racist joke about a child and then lied about it? You want my granddaughter to just accept being treated like this?" Patricia held up her hand, trying to calm the situation. "Please let me handle this. David, I need you to go to the break room right now. We will discuss this later. You're suspended for the rest of the day." David opened his mouth to argue but then closed it. He looked around at all the faces staring at him, some angry, some disappointed. He turned and walked toward the back of the bank, his shoulders hunched. When David was gone, Patricia turned back to Mrs. Williams and Jasmine. "I truly apologize for what happened here today. This is not acceptable behavior, and it does not represent our values as a bank. I want to assure you that we will investigate this matter fully." "An investigation?" Mrs. Williams said. 3 people heard what he said. "What is there to investigate? He made a racist comment, then lied about it." "The facts are clear." Patricia nodded slowly. "You're right. I heard what the witnesses said, but I still need to follow proper procedures. I need to write a full report, talk to all the employees who were present, and submit everything to our corporate office." "And then what?" Mrs. Williams asked. "What happens to him?" "That will be up to corporate to decide," Patricia said. "But I can tell you that we take discrimination very seriously. There will be consequences." Mrs. Williams did not look satisfied. "Will he be fired?" Patricia hesitated. "I can't make that promise right now. That decision is above my level, but I will strongly recommend serious disciplinary action in my report." "That's not good enough," Mrs. Williams said. She reached into her purse and pulled out her cell phone. "I'm going to file a complaint with your corporate headquarters myself, and I'm going to share what happened here on social media. People need to know how your bank treats black customers." Patricia's expression showed worry. "I understand you're upset and you have every right to be. But please, let us handle this internally first. Give us a chance to make this right." "You had a chance to make it right," Mrs. Williams said. "That chance was when you hired and trained your employees. You failed. Now the whole world is going to know about it." Jasmine finally spoke, her voice small and shaky. "Grandma, can we please just go home?" Mrs. Williams put her arm around her granddaughter and pulled her close. "Yes, baby. We're leaving. We'll open your bank account somewhere else, somewhere that respects you." Patricia looked desperate. "Please let me at least have someone else complete your account opening. We want your business. You should have thought about that before your employee decided to be racist," Mrs. Williams said. She took Jasmine's hand and started walking toward the door. The other customers watched them leave. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked angry at the bank. Karen Mitchell, the woman who had spoken up as a witness, called out, "I'm closing my account too. I won't bank somewhere that treats people like this." The elderly man nodded in agreement. "Same here. This is disgraceful." As Mrs. Williams and Jasmine walked out of the bank into the bright sunshine, Jasmine was still crying. Her special day had been ruined. Her grandmother hugged her tight on the sidewalk outside. "I'm so sorry this happened to you, baby," Mrs. Williams said. "But I promise you this is not over. We're going to make sure everyone knows what happened here today. That man is going to face consequences for what he did." Jasmine nodded, wiping her tears. She felt hurt and angry, but she also felt grateful for her grandmother's strength. Mrs. Williams was not going to let this go. She was going to fight for her granddaughter's dignity no matter what it took. As Mrs. Williams and Jasmine reached the parking lot, Patricia Hernandez rushed out of the bank behind them. She was walking quickly, almost running, her high heels clicking on the pavement. "Please wait," Patricia called out. "Can we please talk about this for just a few more minutes?" Mrs. Williams stopped and turned around. She kept her arm around Jasmine protectively. "What more is there to talk about? Your employee was racist to my granddaughter. You suspended him for the day like it's no big deal. We're done here." Patricia caught her breath and held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "I understand you're upset. What happened in there was completely unacceptable. I want to make this right. Please come back inside to my office. Let's sit down and talk about how we can resolve this properly." "Resolve it properly," Mrs. Williams repeated. "The proper thing would have been to fire that man on the spot. But you didn't do that. You gave him a slap on the wrist and sent him home for the day." "I suspended him pending investigation," Patricia corrected. "That's the first step in our disciplinary process. I can't just fire someone without following proper procedures. Our corporate office requires documentation and a full investigation before termination." Mrs. Williams shook her head. "That's the problem with places like this. You care more about protecting your employees than protecting your customers." 3 people heard what he said. "What more investigation do you need?" Patricia looked genuinely troubled. She glanced back at the bank, then at Jasmine, who was still wiping tears from her face. "You're absolutely right that what happened was clear. I believe you and the other witnesses, but I have to follow company policy. If I don't, the termination might not hold up and he could come back." "So you're saying you want to fire him?" Mrs. Williams asked. "I'm saying that I will recommend the strongest possible disciplinary action in my report," Patricia said carefully. "Which, given the circumstances, would likely be termination. But that final decision has to come from corporate. I'm being honest with you about our process." Mrs. Williams studied Patricia's face. She could see that the manager was trying, but it still was not enough. "How long does this investigation take?" "Usually about a week," Patricia said. "I'll submit my report by Monday morning. Corporate will review it and make a decision." "A week?" Mrs. Williams said, her voice rising. "So he gets a nice paid vacation for being racist?" "The suspension is unpaid," Patricia said quickly. "He won't receive any wages for the days he's not working during the investigation." Jasmine tugged on her grandmother's arm softly. "Grandma, I just want to go home." Mrs. Williams looked at her granddaughter and her heart broke again. Jasmine looked exhausted and sad. This whole situation had drained all the joy out of her. "Okay, baby. We're going." Patricia took a step closer. "Before you go, can I please have your contact information? I want to personally call you when we have a decision from corporate, and I'd like to send you something to apologize for this terrible experience. I don't want your money or your gifts," Mrs. Williams said firmly. "I want justice. I want that man to lose his job, and I want your bank to take responsibility publicly for what happened. I can promise you that we will take this seriously," Patricia said, "and I will keep you informed every step of the way. Please just give me your phone number so I can update you." Mrs. Williams hesitated, then gave Patricia her phone number. Patricia wrote it down in her notepad carefully. "Thank you," Patricia said. "I will call you no later than Tuesday with an update." "I promise." "Fine," Mrs. Williams said. "But I'm still filing my own complaint with corporate, and I'm still posting about this on social media. People need to know what kind of employees you have working here." Patricia's face showed worry again. "I understand you want to share your experience. That's your right. But I hope you'll consider waiting until we complete our investigation. If this becomes a public situation before we can resolve it internally, it might complicate things." "Complicate things for who?" Mrs. Williams asked. "For the bank? That's not my problem. You should have thought about your reputation before you let racist employees work here." "I'm thinking about what's best for everyone," Patricia said, including Jasmine. "Sometimes these things can blow up on social media in ways that hurt everyone involved. I just want to protect her from more pain." Mrs. Williams felt her anger flare again. "Don't you dare act like you care about protecting my granddaughter. Where was that protection when your employee was making racist jokes about her? You want me to stay quiet so your bank doesn't look bad? Well, I'm not going to do that." Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but Mrs. Williams held up her hand to stop her. We're done talking. You do what you need to do with your investigation, and I'll do what I need to do to make sure my granddaughter gets justice. Come on, Jasmine." They walked away from Patricia and headed to the bus stop. Patricia stood in the parking lot watching them go, looking worried and defeated. She knew this situation was bad and was probably going to get worse. On the bus ride home, Jasmine was quiet. She stared out the window watching the buildings and cars go by. Mrs. Williams held her hand the whole time. When they got home, Jasmine went straight to her room. Mrs. Williams made some tea and sat down at the kitchen table with her phone. She opened Facebook and started typing. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she wrote out everything that had happened at the bank. She described how excited Jasmine had been to open her first account. She explained exactly what David had said and how he had lied about it afterwards. She wrote about how the manager had suspended him for just one day, and how the bank seemed more interested in protecting itself than in protecting their black customers. She tagged First National Bank's official Facebook page in the post. Before hitting the share button, Mrs. Williams went to check on Jasmine. She knocked softly on her granddaughter's bedroom door. "Come in," Jasmine said quietly. Mrs. Williams opened the door and saw Jasmine lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling. "How are you feeling, baby?" Jasmine's eyes filled with tears again. "I feel stupid. I was so excited about opening that account. I thought I was doing something grown-up and responsible. And then that man just made me feel like nothing, like I was just some stereotype." Mrs. Williams sat on the edge of the bed and took Jasmine's hand. "You listen to me. You are not stupid. You are smart, hardworking, and responsible. What happened today was not about you. It was about that man's ignorance and prejudice. Don't you let anyone make you feel small." "But everyone was staring at us," Jasmine said. "It was so embarrassing." "They were staring because what he did was wrong," Mrs. Williams said. "Those people who spoke up for you, they saw the truth. That woman Karen and that older gentleman, they stood with us. There are good people in this world, baby. But there are also people like David who think they can treat us any way they want. We have to stand up to people like that." Jasmine nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell our story," Mrs. Williams said. "I'm going to post what happened on Facebook so everyone knows what that bank did to you. Is that okay with you?" Jasmine thought about it for a moment. Part of her wanted to just forget the whole thing and move on, but another part of her knew her grandmother was right. If they stayed quiet, nothing would change. David would probably just get a slap on the wrist and keep his job. "Okay," Jasmine said finally. "You can post it." Mrs. Williams smiled sadly and kissed her granddaughter's forehead. "You're a brave girl. I'm so proud of you." She went back to the kitchen and read through her Facebook post one more time. Then she took a deep breath and pressed the share button. The post went live immediately, appearing on her timeline for all her friends and family to see. Within minutes, comments started appearing. Friends and family members expressed shock and anger. They shared the post to their own pages. Jasmine's older sister Nicole, who was away at college, called immediately after seeing the post. "Is Jasmine okay?" Nicole asked, her voice full of concern. Mrs. Williams told her everything that had happened. Nicole was furious. "I'm going to share this everywhere. My friends need to know about this. Everyone needs to know." "Be my guest," Mrs. Williams said. "The more people who know, the better." As the evening went on, the post continued to spread. More and more people shared it, commented on it, and tagged First National Bank. The bank's social media pages started getting flooded with angry messages from people demanding answers. Mrs. Williams checked her phone regularly. Watching the post gain more attention, she felt satisfied that they were not staying silent. David had made a terrible mistake and now he was going to face the consequences. The bank was going to learn that they could not treat people like this without accountability. By Sunday morning, Mrs. Williams's Facebook post had been shared over 500 times. She woke up to find her phone full of notifications. Messages from friends, family members, and even people she did not know personally were flooding in. Everyone wanted to express their support and share their own stories of discrimination. Jasmine's sister Nicole had shared the post with her college friends, and they had spread it across multiple social media platforms. It was now on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. Young people were particularly angry about what had happened to Jasmine. They felt connected to her story because she was close to their age. Mrs. Williams made breakfast while reading through the comments. Many people were tagging First National Bank in their posts, demanding that the bank respond publicly. Some people were calling for boycotts. Others were sharing their own bad experiences with the same bank branch. One comment caught Mrs. Williams's attention. It was from a woman named Sandra Martinez, who wrote that her son had also experienced discrimination at the same bank location 2 years ago. A different employee had followed her son around the bank as if he were going to rob the place, just because he was young and Latino. Sandra had complained to the manager at the time, but nothing had been done. She said she eventually switched to a different bank. Mrs. Williams replied to Sandra's comment, thanking her for sharing and suggesting that she add her story to the conversation. Sandra agreed and wrote her own detailed post about what had happened to her son. She tagged First National Bank and linked it to Mrs. Williams's original post. By noon, the story had been shared over 1,000 times. A local community activist named James Robertson reached out to Mrs. Williams through a private message. He said he had seen her post and wanted to help. James had experience organizing peaceful protests and working with the media. He offered to help amplify Jasmine's story and put pressure on the bank. Mrs. Williams called Jasmine into the kitchen to discuss it. "Baby, there's a man named James Robertson who wants to help us. He's an activist who helps people fight against discrimination. He thinks we should talk to the news about what happened. What do you think?" Jasmine looked nervous. "Talk to the news? Like on TV?" "Maybe," Mrs. Williams said. "I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. This is your story and I won't do anything you don't want to do." Jasmine thought about it carefully. She remembered how hurt and small she had felt in that bank. She remembered David's smirk when he made the racist joke. She remembered how he had lied and tried to make it seem like she and her grandmother had misunderstood him. If she stayed quiet, he might do the same thing to someone else. "Okay," Jasmine said quietly. "I'll do it. But will you be with me?" "Every step of the way," Mrs. Williams promised. She sent a message back to James agreeing to work with him. Within an hour, James had contacted 3 local news stations about the story. 2 of them responded immediately, saying they wanted to do interviews. That afternoon, a reporter named Lisa Chen from Channel 7 News came to their house with a cameraman. Lisa was a young Asian woman who seemed genuinely concerned about what had happened. She sat down with Mrs. Williams and Jasmine in their living room and asked them to tell her everything. Jasmine was nervous at first, but Lisa made her feel comfortable. Jasmine explained how excited she had been to open her first bank account. She talked about working hard all summer and saving her money. Then she described what David had said and how it had made her feel. "I felt like all my hard work didn't matter," Jasmine said, tears forming in her eyes again. "He just saw me as a stereotype. He didn't see me as a person who had worked hard and was trying to do something responsible. He just made a joke about me being black." Lisa nodded sympathetically. "That must have been incredibly hurtful, especially on what was supposed to be such a positive day for you." "It was," Jasmine said. "I don't think I'll ever forget how I felt in that moment." Mrs. Williams added her perspective, explaining how the manager had handled the situation and why she felt the bank's response was inadequate. She also mentioned the other witnesses who had heard David's comment and had been brave enough to speak up. The interview lasted about 30 minutes. Lisa thanked them for their time and said the story would air on the evening news. She also said she would reach out to First National Bank for their official statement. That evening, Mrs. Williams, Jasmine, and Nicole, who had driven home from college to be with her family, sat together on the couch watching the news. When Jasmine's story came on, they held hands tightly. Lisa Chen reported the story fairly and clearly. She showed clips of Jasmine talking about what had happened. She also showed the Facebook post and mentioned how many times it had been shared. Then the report cut to a statement from First National Bank. Patricia Hernandez appeared on screen looking uncomfortable. She stood outside the bank branch with the bank's logo visible behind her. "First National Bank takes all complaints seriously," Patricia said in a careful, measured tone. "We are currently investigating this incident thoroughly. We do not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We ask for patience as we complete our investigation and determine the appropriate course of action." The statement felt empty and corporate to Mrs. Williams. There was no real apology, no acknowledgement of the specific harm that had been done to Jasmine. It was just legal language designed to protect the bank. After the news segment ended, Mrs. Williams' phone started ringing nonstop. More friends and family called to express their support. Strangers sent messages saying they had seen the news and wanted to help. Some people offered to donate money to Jasmine's savings account to make up for the traumatic experience. Others offered free legal advice if the family wanted to sue the bank. On social media, the response was even bigger. The news story had been shared hundreds more times. People were now calling for specific actions. They wanted David to be fired immediately. They wanted the bank to issue a public apology directly to Jasmine. They wanted mandatory training for all bank employees on racism and discrimination. A hashtag started trending on Twitter in their local area. People were using the hashtag Justice for Jasmine to share the story and organize their responses. Some people announced they were closing their accounts at First National Bank in protest. Others said they would never open accounts there. By Monday morning, the story had been picked up by more news outlets. A major newspaper in their state published an article about it. Radio stations discussed it during their morning talk shows. The story was no longer just local news. It was spreading across the region. James Robertson organized a peaceful protest outside the bank branch for Tuesday afternoon. He created a Facebook event and invited everyone who had been following the story. Within hours, over 300 people had responded saying they would attend. Mrs. Williams was amazed by how quickly everything was moving. What had started as one Facebook post on Saturday evening had turned into a major community movement by Monday. People were angry and demanding change. Patricia Hernandez called Mrs. Williams on Monday afternoon. Her voice sounded stressed. "I wanted to update you on the investigation," Patricia said. "We have completed our interviews with all the employees who were present. We are preparing our final report for corporate. When will there be a decision?" Mrs. Williams asked. "Corporate has expedited the review because of the media attention," Patricia said. "We should have an answer by Wednesday at the latest." "That's still not fast enough," Mrs. Williams said. "Every day that man is not fired is another day your bank is saying that racism is acceptable." "I understand your frustration," Patricia said. "I want you to know that I have recommended immediate termination in my report. But the final decision is not mine to make." "I've heard that before," Mrs. Williams said. "Call me when you have real news." She hung up the phone feeling frustrated but also powerful. The community was standing with them. The media was paying attention. The bank could not ignore this anymore. They were being forced to take action because people refused to stay silent. Jasmine felt overwhelmed by all the attention but also supported. Hundreds of people, most of whom she had never met, were standing up for her. They believed her story. They cared about what had happened to her. It made her feel less alone. That night, Nicole sat with Jasmine in her room. "How are you holding up, little sister?" "It's a lot," Jasmine admitted. "I didn't expect all of this when Grandma posted on Facebook. I thought maybe a few people would see it. Now it's on the news and everyone is talking about it." "That's because what happened to you matters," Nicole said. "People are tired of seeing Black people treated badly and nothing changing. Your story is giving people a chance to demand change." "I just wanted to open a bank account," Jasmine said softly. "I know," Nicole said, hugging her sister. "But sometimes things happen that are bigger than we expect. You're being really brave by speaking up. A lot of people would have just stayed quiet and tried to forget about it. But you're making sure this doesn't happen to someone else." Jasmine nodded, feeling a little bit stronger. She was still hurt by what David had said, but she was beginning to understand that her voice mattered. Her story mattered. And people were listening. Tuesday morning arrived with even more momentum behind Jasmine's story. The Justice for Jasmine hashtag had spread beyond their local area and was now being used across multiple states. National civil rights organizations had taken notice. The NAACP issued a statement supporting Jasmine and calling on First National Bank to take swift and decisive action. A local pastor named Reverend Thomas Williams, who was not related to Jasmine's family but had heard about the incident, decided to get involved. He had a large congregation and a strong presence in the community. He had led protests and advocacy work for decades, fighting against discrimination and injustice. Reverend Williams called Mrs. Williams on Tuesday morning. "Sister Williams," he said in his deep, warm voice, "I've been following your granddaughter's story. What happened to that child is unacceptable. I want to stand with you and your family. Our church is behind you 100%. Mrs. Williams felt grateful for the support. "Thank you, Reverend. That means so much to us." I'm planning to come to the protest this afternoon, Reverend Williams said, and I'm bringing members of my congregation with me. We're going to make our voices heard. That bank needs to understand that the community will not tolerate racism. The protest was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right outside the bank branch where the incident had occurred. James Robertson had been coordinating everything carefully. He had obtained the proper permits from the city. He had prepared signs and organized speakers. He wanted the protest to be peaceful but powerful. By 2:30, people started gathering outside the bank. At first, there were about 50 people, then 100, then 200. By 3 o'clock, over 300 people filled the sidewalk and spilled into the parking lot. They carried signs with messages like, "Banking while black should not be a crime," and "Fire racist employees and justice for Jasmine." Mrs. Williams, Jasmine, and Nicole arrived together. When people saw them, they started clapping and cheering. Jasmine felt overwhelmed by the show of support. She had never seen so many people gathered for one cause, especially not for her. James Robertson gave Jasmine a warm hug. "You are so brave," he told her. "What you're doing matters. You're helping to create change." Reverend Williams approached them next, along with about 30 members of his church. He shook Mrs. Williams' hand firmly and smiled at Jasmine. "Young lady, you hold your head up high. You did nothing wrong. This is about standing up for what's right." The protest began with James speaking to the crowd through a megaphone. "We are here today because a 16-year-old girl named Jasmine Williams was treated with disrespect and racism at this bank. She came here to open her first savings account. She had worked hard all summer and saved her money. She was excited and proud, and an employee at this bank made a racist joke about her, right to her face. The crowd responded with angry shouts and boos directed at the bank. This is not just about one incident," James continued. "This is about a pattern of how black people and people of color are treated in institutions like banks. We are seen as suspicious. We are seen as less than. We are not given the same respect as white customers, and we are tired of it." The crowd cheered in agreement. Inside the bank, employees and customers watched nervously through the windows. Some customers decided to leave rather than conduct their business during the protest. Others stood by the windows watching and listening. Patricia Hernandez was on the phone with corporate headquarters, updating them on the situation and asking for guidance. Reverend Williams took the megaphone next. His voice was strong and passionate. "I've been fighting for justice for over 40 years, he said. "I've seen progress, but I've also seen that we still have a long way to go. What happened to Jasmine Williams is proof of that. Our children should not have to experience racism when they're trying to do something positive with their lives." He pointed at the bank building. "First National Bank, we are calling on you to do the right thing. Fire the employee who made that racist comment. Apologize publicly to Jasmine and her family, and implement real training programs to make sure this never happens again. If you don't do these things, we will take our business elsewhere. We will make sure everyone knows that you do not respect black customers." More cheers erupted from the crowd. People chanted "No justice, no peace," and "Do the right thing." Several other community members took turns speaking. A young black woman shared her own story of being treated differently at the same bank. An older Latino man talked about how his wife had been followed around by security in the bank, as if she were going to steal something. Each story added to the narrative that this was not just one bad employee, but a culture that needed to change. Local news stations arrived and began filming. Reporters interviewed protesters, asking why they had come and what they wanted to see happen. Person after person expressed support for Jasmine and anger at the bank. One reporter approached Mrs. Williams and Jasmine. "Can I ask you a few questions?" Mrs. Williams looked at Jasmine, who nodded nervously. They moved to a quieter spot near the edge of the crowd. "Jasmine," the reporter asked, "how does it feel to see all these people here supporting you?" Jasmine's voice was quiet but steady. "It's amazing. I never expected this many people to care about what happened to me. It makes me feel like I'm not alone. It makes me feel like maybe something good can come from something bad." "What do you want to see happen?" the reporter asked. "I want the bank to take responsibility," Jasmine said. "I want them to admit that what their employee did was wrong, and I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Mrs. Williams added, "We're not going to accept empty promises. We want action. We want that employee fired. We want a real apology, and we want the bank to prove that they care about treating all customers with respect." The protest lasted for 2 hours. Throughout that time, the crowd remained peaceful but determined. They chanted, they listened to speakers, and they made their presence known. Cars driving by honked their horns in support. Some drivers rolled down their windows and shouted encouragement. Inside the bank, business had essentially stopped. Very few customers were willing to come inside during the protest. Employees stood around anxiously, unsure of what to do. Patricia was still on the phone with corporate, practically begging them to make a decision quickly. On social media, videos and photos from the protest were being shared widely. The Justice for Jasmine hashtag was now trending nationally. People across the country were talking about the incident. Many shared their own experiences with discrimination in banks and other businesses. The conversation was bigger than just one bank or one employee now. It was about systemic racism and how institutions respond when their employees act with prejudice. By the end of the protest, several news organizations had covered it. It was no longer just a local story. National news websites had picked it up. Opinion writers were publishing articles about what the incident revealed about racism in everyday situations. James Robertson closed out the protest by thanking everyone for coming. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're not going away until we see real change. We'll be back here every day if we have to. First National Bank needs to understand that we are serious." As the crowd began to disperse, many people came up to Jasmine and her family to express their support personally. Some were crying. Others were angry. All of them felt connected to the cause. An older black woman hugged Jasmine tightly. "Thank you for being brave, baby," she said. "I experienced things like this when I was your age and nobody stood up for me. I'm so glad people are standing up for you." A young white woman approached Mrs. Williams. "I'm closing my account at this bank tomorrow," she said. "I can't support a business that treats people this way. Thank you for speaking out." As they walked back to their car, Jasmine felt exhausted but also empowered. She had seen hundreds of people come together because they believed in her story. They believed that what had happened to her was wrong. They were willing to stand with her and fight for justice. That evening, First National Bank's corporate office released another statement. This one was slightly different from their previous responses. It acknowledged the seriousness of the situation and promised that a decision would be made within 24 hours. It also stated that the bank was committed to diversity and inclusion and that they were reviewing their training programs. But for Mrs. Williams and the protesters, it still was not enough. They wanted concrete action, not more promises. They wanted to see David fired. They wanted a real apology, and they were not going to stop until they got it. The pressure on First National Bank was now intense. Their social media pages were flooded with negative comments. People were sharing articles about the incident and calling for boycotts. Several other community groups had announced they would join future protests if the bank did not respond appropriately. The bank was facing a crisis, and everyone knew it. The question was whether they would do the right thing or try to protect themselves and hope the story would go away. Based on everything that had happened so far, it was clear that this story was not going away. The community had spoken, and they demanded justice for Jasmine. Wednesday morning started quietly at the Williams household, but everyone knew something big was coming. Mrs. Williams had barely slept, checking her phone throughout the night to see if there was any news from the bank. Jasmine was exhausted from all the attention and emotions of the past few days. Nicole had decided to stay home from college for the rest of the week to support her family. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Williams's phone rang. It was Patricia Hernandez. Mrs. Williams, Patricia said, her voice serious. I'm calling to let you know that First National Bank's Regional Director, Mr. Robert Thompson, would like to meet with you and Jasmine this afternoon. He's coming from the main office specifically to address this situation. A meeting? Mrs. Williams said skeptically. We've already talked enough. What we want is action, not more conversations. I understand, Patricia said, but Mr. Thompson wants to speak with you personally before we make any public announcements. He's prepared to discuss the outcome of our investigation and what steps the bank will be taking. Please, I'm asking you to give him this opportunity. Mrs. Williams thought about it. She looked at Jasmine, who had come into the kitchen when she heard the phone ring. What do you think, baby? Should we meet with them? Jasmine shrugged, looking tired. I guess we can hear what they have to say. But I'm not going to that bank again. Mrs. Williams spoke back into the phone. We'll meet with him, but not at the bank. He can come to our house or we can meet somewhere neutral, like the community center. Patricia agreed quickly. That's fine. The community center works. Would 2 o'clock this afternoon be okay? We'll be there, Mrs. Williams said and hung up. She immediately called James Robertson to let him know about the meeting. James said he would come too, along with Reverend Williams, to support the family and make sure the bank's representatives were serious about making things right. At 1:45, Mrs. Williams, Jasmine, and Nicole arrived at the community center. It was a large building that hosted various events and meetings for neighborhood residents. James and Reverend Williams were already there, waiting in one of the conference rooms. At exactly 2 o'clock, Patricia Hernandez arrived with a tall white man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit. He had gray hair and a serious expression. Patricia introduced him as Robert Thompson, the regional director for First National Bank. Robert shook everyone's hands, including Jasmine's. He looked directly at her when he spoke. Jasmine, I want to start by saying how sorry I am for what you experienced at our bank. What happened to you should never have occurred, and I'm here to take responsibility for that. Jasmine nodded but did not say anything. She sat between her grandmother and sister, holding Mrs. Williams's hand. Robert sat down across from them and took a deep breath. I've reviewed all the reports from the incident. I've read the witness statements. I've looked at the social media posts and news coverage. And I've spent the last 2 days meeting with our corporate leadership about how to respond. And what did you decide? Mrs. Williams asked directly. First, Robert said, I want to tell you that David Chen has been terminated from his position at First National Bank, effective immediately. He will not be returning to work at any of our branches. There was a moment of silence. Then Mrs. Williams nodded slowly. That's a start. Second, Robert continued, I want to apologize personally and on behalf of First National Bank for the racist comment that was made to Jasmine. There is no excuse for that kind of behavior. It was offensive, hurtful, and completely against everything we claim to stand for as an institution. We appreciate the apology, Reverend Williams said, but we need to know that this is more than just words. What is the bank going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Robert nodded. That's a very fair question. We're implementing several changes. First, every single employee at every branch will be required to complete comprehensive anti-racism and cultural sensitivity training within the next 30 days. This won't be a quick online course. It will be in-person training led by experts in diversity and inclusion, he continued. Second, we're establishing a new position at the corporate level, a director of diversity and inclusion, who will be responsible for overseeing our policies and practices. This person will report directly to our CEO. Third, we're creating a new system for reporting and handling discrimination complaints. Customers will be able to file complaints directly with corporate, not just with branch managers. And there will be strict timelines for investigation and resolution. James Robertson leaned forward. Those are good steps. But how will you make sure employees actually take the training seriously and change their behavior? The training will include assessments, Robert said. Employees who don't pass will have to retake it. and any future incidents of discrimination will result in immediate termination. We're making it clear that this behavior will not be tolerated under any circumstances. Mrs. Williams spoke up. What about Jasmine? She came to your bank to open an account and was humiliated instead. What are you going to do for her? Robert reached into his briefcase and pulled out some papers. We would like to open a savings account for Jasmine at any bank of her choosing, not ours, with an initial deposit of $5,000 from First National Bank. This is our way of supporting her financial future and acknowledging the harm that was done. Jasmine's eyes went wide. $5,000 was a lot of money, far more than the $300 she had saved. Additionally, Robert said, we're establishing a scholarship fund in Jasmine's name. The First National Bank Jasmine Williams Scholarship Fund will provide financial assistance to minority students who are pursuing careers in finance and banking. We're committing $100,000 to start this fund. The room went quiet again. This was more than anyone had expected. But there's one more thing we need to do, Robert said. And this is why I'm here talking to you first before we do it. We want to hold a press conference this afternoon to publicly announce these actions. We want Jasmine and your family there if you're willing. We want to apologize publicly, not just privately. Mrs. Williams looked at Jasmine. What do you think, baby? Do you want to be at this press conference? Jasmine thought carefully. Part of her wanted to just be done with all of this and move on with her life. But another part of her understood that this was important. If she was there when the bank made their public apology, it would mean more. It would show that they were really taking responsibility. I'll do it, Jasmine said quietly. But I want to say something too. I want people to know how this felt and why it matters. Of course, Robert said. You absolutely should speak if you want to. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, news crews gathered outside First National Bank's main office downtown. A podium had been set up with the bank's logo visible behind it. Robert Thompson stood at the podium with Patricia Hernandez beside him. Jasmine, Mrs. Williams, Nicole, James Robertson, and Reverend Williams stood to the side. Cameras flashed as Robert began to speak. Thank you all for coming. I'm Robert Thompson, Regional Director for First National Bank. I'm here today to address an incident that occurred at one of our branches last Saturday involving a 16-year-old customer named Jasmine Williams. He went on to describe what had happened, not hiding or minimizing David's racist comment. He acknowledged that it was unacceptable and that the bank had failed in its responsibility to provide a safe and respectful environment for all customers. I want to be clear, Robert said. The employee who made the racist comment has been terminated. He no longer works for First National Bank and never will again. But firing one person is not enough. We need to look at ourselves as an institution and ask why this happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. He outlined all the changes the bank was implementing, the training programs, the new director position, the complaint system, and the scholarship fund. With each announcement, he emphasized that these were not just temporary measures but permanent commitments. Then he turned to Jasmine. Jasmine, I want to apologize to you directly, in front of everyone here. What happened to you was wrong. You deserve better. You came to our bank with pride and excitement about your first savings account, and we failed you. I am truly sorry. Jasmine stepped up to the podium. She was nervous, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Thank you for the apology. What happened to me last Saturday was one of the worst experiences of my life. I felt small and humiliated. I was just trying to do something responsible with my money, and I was treated like I was nothing because of the color of my skin. She paused, gathering her courage. But I want everyone to know that I'm not just a victim. I'm someone who spoke up, and because I spoke up, with the help of my grandmother, my family, and my community, things are changing. If this happened to you, please speak up too. Don't stay silent. Your voice matters. The crowd of reporters and community members who had gathered began to applaud. Mrs. Williams had tears in her eyes, proud of her granddaughter's strength. Reverend Williams stepped to the podium next. I want to acknowledge First National Bank for taking these steps. But I also want to say that the real credit goes to Jasmine and her family for having the courage to demand justice.